Hi, welcome to RebzBasics. This episode we'll be working with another famous quick food, macaroni and cheese. A dish so familiar to so many that its very name has become an American cultural touchstone, capable of transporting people of all ages and backgrounds back to their childhood, and giving them a memory of a simpler and better time in their lives. A dish that's served at all kinds of restaurants, from greasy spoon diners and fast food joints to five-star hotels with famous big-name chef owners. With that kind of reputation in our shared food history, how could we not work with it? Another reason we've chosen mac and cheese is because of its status as a cheap, easy-to-prepare dish for both the budget-conscious and beginning cook. It's a dish you're going to eat quite often over your life, so it's best to figure out ways to inject a little variety into what is essentially just a very simple and basic dish. The first thing I'm going to show you is how to make a simple cheese sauce, because sometimes the box mac and cheese just isn't cheesy enough. I know sometimes it isn't for me. Next, we'll go over a couple ways to punch up your mac and cheese. Some interesting ideas to add a little variety and to take the dish from being a simple side dish to being a full-blown meal in its own right. And finally, our RebzWay will take mac and cheese and use it to make a new take on an old classic. Let's get started. Alright, we start this out by bringing 1 cup of milk to a boil. Now, as I pointed out in a previous episode, you have to stir milk constantly while it's on the stove so as not to scorch it. You really don't want that. It tastes all burnt and it's immediately ruined, and you have to start over no matter how close you are to being done. Now, add a cup of American cheese. I recommend Velveeta. The money you can save by buying the cheaper store brand just isn't worth the hassle. Velveeta melts quicker and more evenly, and it tastes better. It's just a better all-around product. Now, you don't have to worry if this sauce looks a little thin to you. It needs to be a little thin. As it spends time on the macaroni, the starch in the pasta will thicken the sauce. And there you go. Quick and simple cheese sauce. Okay, now you know how to make a quick and easy cheese sauce so that you can make your macaroni and cheese just as flavorful and as cheesy and saucy as you want it. Next, let's look at some ideas for making your mac and cheese a little tastier. Here's a couple of ideas: chicken broccoli ranch mac and cheese and cheesy chili mac. Here's how to do it. Okay, we're going to start this dish by cooking the chicken. I'm using thighs for this dish because I'm boiling the chicken. If I were using breast, I would roast them in the oven, or I would cook them in a skillet. Remove the skin, place the thighs in a pot with 2 tablespoons each of salt, pepper, and thyme. And then add enough water to cover the chicken with at least 1 inch of water. I added a chopped onion and a couple carrots for flavoring the broth, which I'm going to save for another time. Place the pot on high heat, covered with a lid, and bring it to a full boil. Once it's boiling, remove the lid, turn down the heat, and reduce the pot to a low simmer, then put the lid back on partially. And we're going to cook this for about 2 hours. And now that the chicken is done cooking, I'm going to transfer it from the pot to a plate. Then I'm going to set the plate aside to allow the meat to cool down enough to handle easily. You can put this in the refrigerator to speed up the cooling process if you want, but that's not really necessary, as it only takes about maybe 5 to 10 minutes to cool down enough so that you can handle it without burning your fingers, and that's all you're really looking for. Okay, once the chicken is cooled, taking the meat off the bones, and then I'm putting the bones back in the pot to keep simmering, along with those little pieces of cartilage that can be found at either end of the thigh bone. This will make for a really nice broth for later use. You only need 2 cups of this chicken. So now we're going to put the rest of it into a Ziploc bag, and we're going to freeze it for later use. The same thing will be done with the broth after it's had more time to cook. I'll just put it into a bowl, put a lid on it, and then put it in the freezer. Okay, time to cut this loose meat up into smaller chunks. Now, I could tear this up by hand if I wanted, but that tends to make for long, stringy pieces of meat, so I just prefer to cut it up with a knife so that I can have better management of the meat itself. Here's some broccoli. We're just going to cut it up into bite-sized pieces, whatever size you're comfortable with. You only need about a cup or so of broccoli, give or take, so this is a little too much, but I'll just put it away and use it for something else. It's one thing you should always learn to do, is utilize everything you bought. Now, to make your mac and cheese, just follow the directions on the packaging. You're going to bring your water to a boil, and then you're going to add the macaroni. And while you don't have to stir this constantly, you do need to stir it often to keep the macaroni from sticking to the bottom of the pot, and also to keep it from clumping together, as all pastas will do if you don't stir them regularly while cooking. Now, just before draining the macaroni, we're going to add the chicken and the broccoli so we can get it heated up real quick. For the rest, just follow the recipe on the box. Add the margarine, the milk, and the powdered cheese packet, but at the end, we're going to add a heaping tablespoon of ranch dressing seasoning mix. Now, we stir everything together, and we keep stirring until the margarine is melted and the cheese is completely dissolved and smooth. You can look down in there and make sure it has no clumps. And if it does, just keep mixing until everything is nice and smooth. This may look a little watery. If it does look a little bit watery, just set it aside for a few minutes and allow the macaroni time to soak up some of that liquid. Here's the moment of truth. Season with salt and pepper to taste and serve. And there you have it. Chicken broccoli, ranch mac and cheese. Tasty, filling, and easy to make for one person or for 10. Enjoy. Let's start with a diced onion. We need half a medium-sized onion diced, so I'm going to show you a good trick for dicing onions. First, you cut off the stem end of the onion and leave the root end intact. The root end is on the bottom of the onion, and the bottom of the onion is rounded while the top kind of comes to a point. Cut the onion in half from top to bottom and remove the dry outer skin. Now, laying the onion on the board like that, like so, take your knife and slowly make a cut that goes down about 3/4 of the way on the onion. Take care not to cut all the way down and make it a separate piece. You want it to stay connected. Next, make cuts perpendicular to that first cut at the thickness you want your onion pieces, more for smaller pieces and fewer for larger ones. Now cut across, and you have your onion diced safely and efficiently. Starting with a hot skillet and a small amount of oil, saute the diced onions until they become translucent. Now add 1 pound of ground beef and make sure to break the pieces into more manageable sizes with the spatula while it's cooking. Now let's add 2 teaspoons of salt and 1/2 teaspoon each of black pepper, garlic powder, ground cumin, and chili powder. Now would be the time to add more heat by adding chopped hot peppers or crushed red pepper flakes if you're so inclined. I'm not going to do that though. Now you're going to cook this until the meat's thoroughly browned. Then we're going to drain some of the grease from the pan, but not all of it. We don't want to lose all of our flavoring. Return the pan to the stove, and now I'm going to add some of that cheese sauce we made before because I like this dish to be cheesy. Mix it well. We're going to heat it till it's bubbling, and then we remove it from the heat. Prepare your mac and cheese according to the directions on the box, and now add in the cheese and meat mixture. Stir it in thoroughly. Again, you don't have to worry if the sauce looks like it's too thin or if it looks like there's too much. The macaroni will soak it up. Now for plating. I garnished with some shredded cheese and a little black pepper, but you can do whatever you want. The sky's the limit, and the only limit is your imagination. And there it is, chili cheese mac, suitable for eating all by itself, or you could even put it over some nacho chips and add a little shredded cheese and warm it up in the oven for a twist. Alright, there's some interesting ideas for you to try out sometime. Now for the RebzWay. We're going to take macaroni and cheese and turn it on its ear. We're going to use it to make a new take on the classic soup and sandwich luncheon special. Take a look. Okay, we start by cutting up some ham. You need about 1 cup of ham cut up. If your cutting board starts sliding around, that's unsafe. The way you fix that is you place a wet towel down on the top of the table and then set the board on top of that. You don't want your board sliding around while you've got a knife in your hands, for obvious reasons. Now make sure the ham is cut into small pieces. If the pieces are too big, they may cause this dish not to work by not allowing it to set up. Prepare the mac and cheese according to the recipe. Then add the cup of ham and mix it in thoroughly. Now would be the time to add more cheese if you wanted, but that's not necessary for this dish. Now, Put the mac and cheese into a bread loaf pan that you've lined with plastic wrap or aluminum foil. I prefer plastic wrap, with enough extra to hang down the sides of the pan. I got my bread pans in a bundle when I bought my metal baking pans. If you don't have one, you can buy a disposable one at most stores. While you're putting the mac into the pan, be sure to press it into every corner and keep pressing it down as you add more. At the end, fold the plastic up over the top and refrigerate overnight to allow it to set. I put a cookie sheet on top of the pan and then set a couple cans on it to weigh it down. Okay, now it's time to take our mac loaf out of the pan. This is where the plastic lining is going to come in handy. It makes removing this in one piece a lot easier. Just do it slowly, tapping on the sides and the bottom and allowing the weight of the loaf to help you as you gently pull on the plastic wrap. You could even place the pan in a larger pan of warm water for a few moments just to loosen it up a little bit if it doesn't want to come out so easy, but I don't think that's going to be necessary here. Next, cut the loaf into pieces approximately 1 inch thick. This is where having a slicer knife with a long blade comes in handy. I don't want the loaf to fall apart on me, so I keep the pressure to a minimum by using the entire length of the blade and slicing slowly, which lets the knife cut through the loaf with very little downward pressure needed. Okay, this is what's known in food service as a standard breading procedure. The first bowl has flour, the second bowl has beaten eggs, and the third has breadcrumbs seasoned with a little salt and pepper. We start with the flour. Dredge the slice in the flour, then dip in the eggs, and finally roll it in the breadcrumbs. At every stage of this process, make sure to gently pat and shake off any excess before moving to the next step, because every step is meant to build on the previous step and make a coating that adheres to whatever it is you're breading. Small clumps of flour left on the surface will be places where the eggs won't soak in well and make a paste that holds the breadcrumbs on. And leaving excess egg dripping off is going to cause places where the breadcrumbs will come off while it's being fried instead of sticking to the surface as a cohesive coating. When finished, the slice should have a coating that is moist but not soaking wet in appearance. If it looks too wet, roll it in the breadcrumbs again. And if the surface jiggles when you shake it, that's a sign that there's too much egg under that particular spot. So wipe it off with your finger and roll it in the breadcrumbs again. Breading is a simple and easy process in cooking, but it's one that has to be done right if you want good results. Now it's time to fry our mac and cheese slices. I would normally do this with oil, but for this dish I'm using a mixture of oil and margarine because I want to add a buttery flavor to it. Like with all frying, heat your pan first, then add your oil and let it heat up, then add your product. You want the oil to be deep enough that the oil comes up about 1/4 inch on the side of whatever it is you're cooking. A sign that your pan and oil are hot enough is when you put in the slices and the oil at the edges starts to bubble right away. Let the slices cook until they're nice and browned, then turn them over and brown the other side. If you've done this right, the slices will have gotten a nice browning while having enough time to get hot all the way to the middle. Plating time. I've chosen to pair this with tomato soup, but any soup you care to use should be just fine. I cut the mac and cheese slice on an angle like this to show the contrast between the inside and the outside, and also to give some height to the presentation. I find canned tomato soup to be a little sweet, so make sure to season it to your taste, and I added some green onions for color and bite. And here it is, grilled ham and cheese mac, great little lunch for a nice spring day.
Pretty cool, huh? You know, if you get nothing else from this series, I hope you get this. You're not limited by my choice of ingredients to use for jazzing up any of these dishes. Your only limit is your own imagination. And that's it for this episode of RebzBasics. If you found this episode interesting or useful, click like and subscribe and turn on notifications, because we're going to have regularly updated content here. And be sure to tell your friends about the channel. So until next time, we'll see you at Family Meal.